Barbara, and thank you all very much for coming. So about 5 years ago, actually early 2013, was the first time I met Shannon Moeck. I saw an article in the Northern Virginia Daily that Shannon had putting out a call for volunteers to staff a new visitor center for a new national park that had been commissioned by Congress in 2002. So I had always been interested in history. I had some interest in the Civil War. Probably like many, when I was a teenager, I read Gone with the Wind, The Red Badge of Courage, some of Bruce Catton. And then, you know, life comes in and I was on and off. But once my husband and I bought property in Warren County, now I had come from New York State. So now we're in Virginia, in the heart of Civil War land. So I was, you know, again, it was rekindled. So when I saw this, I thought, and I was looking for volunteer opportunities. Oddly enough, I was also being recruited for the Women's Resource Center. So these two kind of came together like the perfect storm. But they have been the most worthwhile volunteer efforts for me. It was just great. It appealed to different sides of me. So anyway, I called, and Shannon said, well, you know, I think I may have enough people. I was a little bit late in responding, but she said, but come in and we'll talk. 2 hours later, I was signed up. And it's been a great relationship, as she's not only my boss, but she's become a great friend. And I have really learned so much from her and from the other rangers at the park. And it's a wonderful opportunity and a wonderful place to be. So I hope, I'm so glad that Shannon was able to come and talk with you all today. And I hope you'll have a chance, I'm sure she'll tell you more, to visit her and to visit the park. So, Shannon Moeck.
Thank you, Lee. Wow. Look at this room, and look at the empowerment that's just flowing within and without all of us. I like to say that I'm getting a PhD in winging it, and it's through the experiences of mentorship and friendships that I've gained along the way and hopefully provided along the way. And I thought your vision, your mission statement, empowering women to change their world, is so fantastic, because we all need some help. Whether we're in our highs or we're lows or just kind of cruising along, having people, whether it be in our professional or personal lives, to help you get through that experience is so critical. So Lee has asked me to come here and share my journey, my experience with you all, and talk about the work that I do. And life, right? Takes you on journeys and paths you never would have expected. I'm originally from New Jersey. When I was 11, my family moved us to Northern Virginia, and things didn't work out so well for my parents. My dad lost his job, they had a bankruptcy, and we moved to the Shenandoah Valley because it was cheaper. And I went from Metro New York to Metro DC to Steven City as a freshman in high school. But that being said, you know, I still had great experiences, made great friends here, kept in touch with friends from other places. So that was kind of the building block of my, I would say, my extrovertedness. It brought that out of me where my brother became more of an introvert. But I have specific passions in my life, and I'd say when I was 11 or 12, travel. Started with the Eiffel Tower. I don't remember why, but I want to go to Paris. And then as I aged, I want to do Europe. Now my mother is a wonderful woman, but she's a mother and she's overprotective, and it was, you can travel, but you're not allowed to travel alone. So this mantra kind of got put into my head. Go do it, but just don't do it alone. So I saved money to travel, and you know, I was the one who wanted to do that, but my friends 16, 17, who was saving money for that. So that's one aspect. And when I was in school, here, my whole moving experience, my freshman year, I was in Broad Run High School in Ashburn. The end of my freshman year was the bankruptcy. We moved. I was in James Wood Amherst campus. Then I was in James Wood Ridge. Then I was the first class of Sharando. So my high school experience, I was in a different building every year. But by the time I hit my junior year, I was so excited because I was going to take an AP American history class. I loved history. I was so excited. Prep for school, prep to learn, all this wonderful stuff. So school at that time, of course, we started after Labor Day, and about 3 weeks into the fall semester, I got sick with some sort of upper respiratory, and I missed class for a week. At the beginning of the school year, but I was legitimately sick, and I showed back up in class, and that history teacher actually said to me, "How do you expect to make it for college if you can't show up for high school?" Guess how quickly I dropped AP history and went into a regular history class. All right, I loved history, but that one instance, that one connection was a missed opportunity. But I had other interests. I loved music. Not that I could play or sing or any of that stuff, but I just loved being in music. And at this point, it was the height of the music festivals, the Lollapaloozas. I went to Woodstock '94. I want to do something with music because when I was in high school, I was also into theater. And not that I was on stage as much as I am a ham and I like to be a presence, I don't like to act. But I did the lighting, promotions, sound. And I thought, wow, if I could do something with music, where I can do audio visual, basically I wanted to be a roadie. I wanted to haul gear, set up lights, and just hear the best music in the world. So where do I go to college? It's not for history anymore, but I go to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. I had a music and video business program. Boy, experiences. Show up, super excited, meeting all these wonderful people, but I'm not having so much success in class. And while I recognize I'm not stupid, I felt stupid. What I learned and realized in the years later was that it was a for-profit school, and that was really before we understood what for-profits are as they are today. The teachers, the educators were professionals in the field that had no business teaching because all they were doing was spewing knowledge, fact. I was in classrooms with adults who were there just for the piece of paper, they already knew how to do the work. Not that I have a problem with non-traditional students, but it was really hard for these teachers to disseminate the knowledge. And I was struggling as much as I wanted to be able to do video editing and audio editing, but I realized the one thing I wasn't taught or prepared for when I was younger was to ask questions. I didn't know how to say, "I don't understand." And a couple times I actually did something like that. Basically, all they did was repeat the information back slower. But at 18, 19, I didn't recognize that, so I ultimately dropped out of school. I was working. I had many jobs. I worked as a waitress at Applebee's. I worked for a candy store in Pittsburgh. But I was actively involved with attending music events. I was 18, 19, going out, loving it, but getting connected within that community. Also, remind you, in the back of my head, I always wanted Europe. That dream never went away, but I knew I had, Mom told me I have to travel with somebody. So, I meet a boy. I fall in love. He's going to travel with me. Oh, in the meantime, I enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh, but I met a boy, and we were going to travel. Guess what took precedent? I don't think I made it 3 days at Pitt. I was like, no, let's save to travel. Now, that didn't quite work. Although a year later we were married. I was working in retail. I worked at a Barnes & Noble. He was a chef by trade. He went to culinary school. Well, he was also very passionate about music. And on our own, in a very small way, big fish in a small pond kind of thing, we started doing music promotions. We started working with local clubs, local record stores, and over the course of 2.5 years, he was DJing and I was getting him booked in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Cleveland, Columbus. So for 2 years, we were working our full-time day jobs and running around doing all this stuff at night. And even though we were in our early 20s, we did burn out. And I finally said, we weren't making money, we were just doing it for the love of it. And then finally I said, I've got to travel. I've got to see the world. Well, sadly, his father worked for US Air and he wouldn't get on a plane. But he opened up a new door for me that I probably wouldn't have put first. And he said, let's go see America. So we got in our car, 3-month road trip. And over the course of the next several years, we did 3 major cross-country trips. And I'd gone to a lot of national parks with my parents growing up, but here I am, an adult, camping in these beautiful western parks. And I'm sure, I guarantee the thought ran through my mind, oh, it'd be really cool to be a park ranger. But what have I done in my life that would warrant me becoming a park ranger? So, again, I ended up working for a business for about 9 years. It was a mailing business, so if anybody knows mailboxes, etc., it was a privately owned. This woman, Annette Patterson, became my surrogate grandmother. She became a mentor. She became a dear friend. She passed away in 2013, and I was so grateful that I was able to spend that last year with her. She died at 87, with heart failure. But I learned so much from her. It was in the business was in a very affluent neighborhood, so I was working with the moneyed people of Pittsburgh. I honed in on my customer service skills. I learned overall that all people are people regardless of where their background is, no matter how much money or how little money. And while it wasn't necessarily the most challenging job in terms of hard histories and the work I do now, it was still a great job just to grow up. And then in 2004, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. I'd been gone for 10 years and it was time to come back home. So my ex-husband and I uproot. We come to the valley, and we were just talking about, some ladies and I were just talking about Winchester and the Village Square. And my ex wanted to open a business. And we were like, let's watch that restaurant and see what it does. Because if it succeeds, chances are. There's not a lot I give my ex-husband credit for, but he saw what downtown. No, I'm just kidding. So, again, to help my mother, I just needed a job to make money and to be able to be available for her. So I ended up working at a factory. Hours 7 to 3:30, Monday through Friday. I was home to help. And then about a year and a half in, my marriage ended. And I got to tell you, when your passions are travel and music and no degree, no education, that divorce really zonked me. I was not prepared for it. And I made some really bad choices, really bad decisions, but I learned from them. I ultimately started dating somebody. I moved to Richmond, Virginia for about 8 months. I became a bank teller for Wachovia right before the crash of '08 happened. But to be honest, I was drinking excessively. I'm sure I made a lot of people worry unnecessarily. In fact, it got to the point where I was worried about myself. And through conversations with my aunt up in New Jersey, one of my dearest friends down in Richmond, and just talking to my own mother, Shannon, go back to school. Go back to school. Got a brain, start using it. So the decision was, do I stay in Richmond and go to one of the community colleges where I'd still probably be in that not so great environment, or do I come back to the valley? Lord Fairfax saved me. Jonathan Noyalas. Do you guys know who Professor Jonathan Noyalas is? He was the history professor at Lord Fairfax. He's now at Shenandoah University. Life has a tremendous way of going in circles. I sit in a world civilization class with Professor Jonathan Noyalas, and if you've ever heard him, man, you don't have to like history, but you will suddenly love it. And I was like, oh, I forgot how much I loved history. And what I liked about his class is that he would have everybody on the first day introduce themselves. So here I am, 32, 33 years old, and I've learned the lessons. And when it got to, hi, I'm Shannon Moeck. Professor, while I understand that you have high expectations from your students, I want you to know I have high expectations out of you. Instant friendship. Because of my bad experience at the Art Institute, I didn't want this to be a wasted opportunity. And he started, or he did these, he still does, but now at Shenandoah, twice a year tours on Civil War battlefields. So I was starting to get that passion back that was put out, that spark that was put out when I was 16 years old. And he was working on the historic resource study for Cedar Creek and Belle Grove National Historical Park. And in 2009, my current boss got hired in as the chief of interpretation. And on one of Jonathan's tours, I was always in Jonathan's car. Oh, Professor, I'm with you. You learn more when you get to ride with the person who knows what's going on. And he intentionally put my boss and I together with the idea that Shannon could probably work for this guy one day. Now, at the time when I came home from Richmond and started at Lord Fairfax, I started working for an Edward Jones office. Varied life, right? Which was miserable. Crash of 2009, working for one of the top producers in the company, taking 9 to 12 credit hours at night. I know I'm not stupid, but it just didn't fit. And as I'm trying to come out of that depression from my divorce and the drinking, you know, when you're working somewhere where it's just not fitting, you're not feeling great anyway. But it was more motivation to throw all my passion into school. And about 6 months after I met my boss, he went back to my professor and said, do you know anybody who might be interested in a seasonal job? It's like I introduced you to her. So he gave me a call and asked if I would apply, and I said, absolutely. Now, for any of you who've ever worked with government, it's very different than a private world. So I worked for Edward Jones. I got, made a decent hourly wage, and I got benefits. My boss was about to offer me a position that would be seasonal, no guarantees past summer. I'd be losing the opportunity for continuing benefits. And when he called me after he decided to hire me, he called me on a Friday. We had it all coordinated. I went to the Chinese restaurant. It was before Thai Winchester, I think, was open. So that way I wouldn't be at work as he was calling to tell me yes or no. And he said, I want to offer you the position, but I want you to think really hard. I want you to take the weekend and consider what you'd be leaving before you say yes. And that's when I said, holy heck, I want to work for this guy because he cares. He wanted to be completely upfront. And I said to him, hey, Eric, sure, I hear you. I'll accept the job now and I'll call you on Monday to confirm. I figured one season to wear the hat. Right? I mean, this is what anybody wants, is the hat. So, one season to wear the hat, and I'll go back to school full time. You just heard my life story, right? I'm a cat. I've realized I just keep landing on my feet. I want my education. At this point, I'm ready to go for my PhD. Everything that I did not succeed at earlier in life, I wanted now. I'll come work for you for a season, get that opportunity. Started making all these claims. Ooh, UVA looks really nice. Ooh, William & Mary looks really nice. I wanted the best of the best. And then my mom said, Shannon, you should look into Sarah Lawrence. You guys familiar with Sarah Lawrence? It's up in New York. Most expensive school in the nation. Sign me up. I'm worth it. Right? So the trajectory of how I went from just being this to now I want it all. Meanwhile, I'm working this seasonal gig, it's not going to last past August. Well, we'll keep you on part-time through the fall. Oh, we'll keep you on full-time. but I'm in the student seasonal status, so there's no benefits, and it's the government. There will never be a permanent position. Okay, no problem. I started making plans. Stupid. Make plans? It doesn't work. I'm 33 years old. I'm 34 years old. My graduation present from the community college is going to be a trip to Europe. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. I'm going for 3 months. I'm going to Sarah Lawrence. I put out money, $5,000 for a tour for 3 weeks in Europe. Buy my plane tickets. My boss comes to me, guess what? We can hire you permanently. I said, Eric, I just spent all this. Well, if we can make it work, we'll allow you to take a leave of absence. But I'm more concerned about your education, because if you're here, you can't continue school. Or you'd have to continue it locally. Can I go to Europe? Okay, fine. So we made that work. Took me 5 years to get through the community college going part-time. I got 2 degrees, a communications degree and a liberal arts degree. That was a long time. I was kind of ready for a break, as much as I was ready for it all. I was very excited about this opportunity. Who passes up a full-time permanent job with the federal government? I got my dream trip to Europe, which was another building block for my success. Because I truly, at this point, learned how to operate independently. Nobody could say I want to go that way when I really wanted to go that way. There didn't have to be any compromises. Or when I came into a point where there was, oh, how do I negotiate this obstacle? There was nobody there to help. I had to figure it out. So just this amazing life experience, but now I'm hooked on Europe, and I'm not going this year, and I'm very upset. Next year. So now, graduated from North Fairfax, went to Europe. I'm now a full-time park ranger. Let me ask you all, has anybody been to Cedar Creek and Belle Grove National Historical Park? How many of you have been on one of my programs? Our park's pretty darn cool, and anybody who didn't get one of these, I can pass them off. Now, our mission of our park is pretty complex. While the park itself stands for the boundaries within the Cedar Creek battlefield, our mission is to interpret the whole history of the Shenandoah Valley. We call it from backcountry to breadbasket to battlefield and beyond. After everything I just told you, I never studied much of this. I got some greatest hits of Civil War battlefields, but this was an interesting task to take on. And I think that's one of the things my boss Eric saw in me. Oh, we're never going to be able to guarantee you anything past August. Well, because of this diverse working background, life experience, particularly with the Edward Jones position, my job was to anticipate the client needs and my boss's needs before they knew what they needed. So I was able to come in as a non-traditional student hire, where his background was Gettysburg, working with your typical 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Not to dismiss where they are at in life, but they just didn't have. So I was able to come in and just start doing stuff with limited direction. So I started in 2010. That was our first season of doing programs. And then by 2013, we opened our small little visitor center. And not only now am I doing interpretive programs, which is pretty standard for your GS5 level park ranger, but I'm running a website. I convinced my boss to let me start a Facebook page because that's the new media. Now we're opening a visitor center, and boy, somebody has to design those exhibits. So I'm getting all these opportunities of experience that had I gone to a Shenandoah, which Shenandoah is wonderful, but you guys are already established. And then I'm asked, do I want to run the volunteer program? Heck yeah, I love people. And what a rewarding experience it is. It sounds like you guys do a lot of volunteer work outside of just here. Man, volunteers. That's why I want to retire. I don't want to work anymore. I want to retire and go volunteer at the national parks. My retirement goal is to see during my working life, to see the world and then retire and become a campground host. That's what I want to do when I retire. But through these experiences of bringing on, I have about 20 volunteers that I've consistently had since 2013, and how much I've learned from their experiences has helped to shape not only the park, but also myself. Because all in all, it's about building community. I think that's why all of you are in this room. Now, as the years went on, 2014 was a very big year for the park because it was the 150th anniversary of the 1864 campaign, which was when Cedar Creek happened. Talk about those circles. We had a big event to plan. We had promotions we had to do. We had to coordinate bringing people in from all these places. So that was everything I had done when I was that small music promoter. Loved it. I love logistics and strategy. As much as I love giving programs, like that just, and then to see that event be a success, and nobody got hurt, and people learned, and they enjoyed, and they felt why there's power in place, and why Cedar Creek Battle was so significant and important, and why it still resonates today. Now, also in 2014, I had it in my head that we weren't telling the complete story. Somehow talking about the servants just didn't strike the right chord with me. And again, this is a new park. Nobody's been here for decades doing the research and work. So I was like, I'm going to do a program about slavery in the Shenandoah Valley. I'm going to talk about slavery valley-wide. Holy heck, do you know how different slavery was from Clark County to Augusta County? That was, again, that PhD in winging it. It was a very successful program. I had about 80 guests show up, which our normal programs were lucky if we get 10. But that showed me that people want to know. My next program was about the post-war period, which really, I was learning that I didn't know how to do the work because this research takes a lot. But there was this great perfect storm, as Lee said before, where Belle Grove had also gotten a new executive director. And Belle Grove determined they wanted to really focus on this work. So between the park's direction, or directive, or mission, I should say, my interest, now Belle Grove is very interested, we've now brought to life the story of the enslaved cook. And it's a program I'm offering once a month. So it's again to give voice to communities that have been lost. And as I say these words and I think of everything I've just said, communities, empowerment, connection, and sometimes I wonder, am I doing a good enough job? And I realize I'm connecting all these dots. And I'm not going to always get it right, but I'm trying. So I keep digging and I keep pushing, and I keep fearing that I'm not doing it justice. And I'm doing a brand new program on June 2nd, which when I leave here, I'm going back home. I have my computer with me. I'm working from home, so I can have quiet space. And it's the story of from Claremont Farm, which is a farm in Berryville, to Josephine City, which was an African-American, well, it is an African-American community. But Ellen McCormick, the mistress, her husband passed away. She was left with a lot of debt. And she becomes one of the biggest sellers to African Americans in Clark County. And I thought I understood the story, but as I'm interviewing and talking to other people, I'm realizing all these oral traditions and oral histories and what people want to believe as the absolute truth isn't it. So I appreciate the fact that I'm not afraid to talk to people. Which again, I think that when I started moving at 11 helped me not fear people. because these stories are too important and they've been neglected for too long. I know I'm not going to be 100% right, but I'm doing my best. And then at the end of June, I'm giving a program at Belle Grove. The oral tradition dictates that the cemetery behind the house is the enslaved cemetery. We're not sure. But I'm going to use that space as an opportunity to tell the story. Understanding that, okay, while we believe through oral tradition, but again, to give voice to these stories that have been lost. Civil War is still really cool, but it's been done a million times, and I'm just really excited about this opportunity at a new park with this broad mission to be able to start telling all of the stories. So when I look at this resource center and the work that you ladies do, and while I haven't been directly connected, I've been directly connected because the mentorship I've gotten from Lee. So just through our friendship, she has empowered me to continue the journey and the change that I am continually on. So for Lee, I thank you. Yeah, I don't know, any questions? So different than talking history, right? So, well, it's amazing to me. The one thing I didn't mention that I thought about was, particularly when I was going through the divorce and drinking a lot, I'd always been kind of a tomboy, and I'd always been around a lot of guys, used to just that guy attitude. But somehow I started connecting with a lot of women in that period, and I learned the beauty of the sisterhood and how much we can help each other and empower ourselves for the good, the bad, and the ugly. So just seeing this group, I feel that energy, so I thank you all for sharing that with me. So, but any questions?
I just want to say that with all that you've been through, you have finally found your niche. I have been at your presentations. You haven't really understood anything about the slavery in this area until you listen to Shannon. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest strongly that you attend her sessions. She's amazing. You have found who you are.
Oh, thank you, Sheila. Thank you. On June 3rd, Belle Grove is hosting their annual Garden Fest, and at 12:30 I will be presenting the story of Judah the enslaved cook, a half-an-hour program. So if you like gardening and you just want to come out and enjoy a beautiful day, it's all free. But the rest of the year, so July, August, September, October, those first Saturdays, that program will be offered at 2:30. And I'm going to keep digging and doing the work because how many stories, so for example, Belle Grove from the time Isaac Height Jr. and Nellie Madison arrived here in 1783 until the death of the second Mrs. Height in 1852, there were 276 enslaved people who made Belle Grove work. That's 276 stories. And I know sort of one based on 2 documents. So we're really, if anybody has an interest in research, particularly genealogy, I'm the volunteer coordinator. So, or go to Belle Grove, because that's where that work is the core of that work. But again, if anybody has any connections to stories of the Valley that you would like to share, because we're trying to build our archives as well. I don't know how many of you are Generations Valley, but we definitely, it's interesting watching a new park develop. It's really interesting. So, and a lot of moving parts. And I think because our themes are so broad, you know, when you think of a place like Gettysburg, this epic monumental battle, and you know, as soon as that battle ended, it became enshrined basically, and people have been studying it since the day after, which is awesome. We don't have that here. So anyway, I hope through sharing my experiences and my journey helps you either help yourself or other young women you meet along the way. And certainly not just women, but the people, because it's all about the connections and in sharing the stories and sharing the legacies and moving forward to just being connected. So, but I thank you ladies all for your time.